Hey, all. Chris, thank you so much. I'm going to dive into a more granular, very spectacular part of building brands, and that is cost of goods and how much shit costs to put into a bottle, which is not like the most fabulous topic to get into, but if we're all trying to pay for something, then we kind of need to have an understanding of what something costs. My name's Paul Monahan. I'm the co-founder and COO of Matchbook Distilling Company, which is a small distillery on the east end of Long Island on the North Fork. Strange little place. We're closer to Boston Logan Airport than we are JFK. We have New England sports fans, but New York taxes. It's a beautiful bucolic backdrop. We are a facility that provides services and sells products. So our biggest service we provide is for young entrepreneurs or old entrepreneurs who have that itch to create a spirit brand in the midst of a heavily congested space. And you need a facility that can mash, ferment, rectify, bottle, and then even wholesale your product direct to a New York retailer. We have all of those licenses and capabilities in-house. So we are a true concept to shelf facility where if you just come to us and you say, I think I want this, in a certain amount of time with a certain amount of regulating approvals, we could have it. But before we dive into actually like what we think we want to retail our product for, which is usually like the initial conversations, you need to have an understanding of how to get all of your raw materials and dry goods onto property to use to fill and then produce, right? So I have a series of pro forma invoices, which is a funny term that all of vendors send people who are buying shit. And they quote you one price, but then on the pro forma invoice, it actually gives you how much things actually cost, which when you factor then into a yield or finished bottle, dramatically changes the price of your bottle before a wholesaler buys it and tax on 30%, and before then a retailer buys it and tax on 30%. And then all of a sudden, you're like, I might have wanted to launch this super premium gin at $38 on an Astor wine shelf. Turns out to be like $49. So understanding data, the granular data that you pay for when you're producing a project or trying to bring a project to life is the super important part. If you cannot put together enough funding or have enough money to pay the bills in net 30 or net 60, if someone's nice enough to give you terms as a young startup brand, then unfortunately you're not going to get past that first purchase order from a distiller like us. So here's some production unit economics, which again is not the most like Instagrammable famous thing to look at, but we all need numbers, okay? So to break down how much a 300-gallon run costs of a spirit as opposed to a 600-gallon run of a spirit, and that just means the yield. So if you want to get 300 gallons, okay, which times 5, if anybody's a math major, then you'll get your 750 bottle yield, or a 600-gallon run, these are the hours used to produce your spirit at a contract distillery. And this is not just Matchbook, this would be other New York contract distilleries or anywhere else in the States. It's mostly cleaning, which is concerning. But not concerning because contract distilleries make rum, they make whiskey, they make anything the TTB allows them to make and the SLA in New York allows them to make. So we could be making Chris's whiskey, the next day we're making April's rum, the next day we're making Justin's vodka. None of them want their spirits to taste like the previous spirit that was used on the equipment. So most of the time and most of the cost is actually in cleaning, okay? Which is like, how come you just don't clean faster? Because that's just not how it works, okay? So in a 300-gallon run, you would have 1 hour for match CIP, okay? Does anybody know what CIP stands for if you worked on a production floor? It's a terrible acronym. It does not mean a chemical. It means cleaning in place. Very silly. You'd have a mash, would be a couple hours. You'd have a transfer, which just means a pump over from the mash to the fermenter. And then you'd have a still for a couple hours. Spirit runs would be 8 hours. We'd have to proof for 5 and filter for 2. If we look over to the 600-gallon, roughly all of the actual action items are the same. Distillation's still 8. The mash is 2.5. The transfer is 1. The difference is essentially, you're not cleaning because you're running more of the product. If it takes 8 hours to distill each of these three lovely people's product, that's actually each a 24-hour production job, because it's 8 hours to clean before, 8 hours to distill, 8 hours to clean afterwards. So each of the individual jobs takes 24 hours, okay? So the idea is you're maximizing your potential cost of goods, because you're saying, you know what, inevitably, I see success in this brand. I've studied all the marketing data. It makes sense for me to pay very close to the same amount for twice as much yield, okay? And that's if you look at those bottom two columns. The cost of the 300 gallon, the production cost is $880, okay? That's just production costs. That does not include your raw material, your bottle, your stopper, your label, your federal excise taxes, the labor to fill, any other storage stuff that all of these facilities charge you for. 600 gallon run, if you look on the right, is basically the same for twice as much yield. So your production cost drops in half, okay? Just for producing more at once. It's not necessarily like we have MOQs or minimums are really important, but if you're trying to understand how much a single 750 ml bottle is gonna cost at the end of a production run for your initial run for your wholesaler to launch in a market, these are dramatically affecting how much that 750 costs, hands down. And this is just the liquid, okay? This is everybody's favorite topic around the world now, glass, okay? So this is a pro forma invoice for a big, massive glass provider. And if we look at buying 10,000 units of an Arizona 750, which is a very common well bottle, not a custom mold, not embossed, not debossed, no nothing. Standard 750 glass, okay? 10 pallets, okay? 84 cases, just over 1,000 units per pallet, so you're getting a little over 10,000 units. That glass alone costs you $17K, okay? And then they smoke you for pallets, and then they smoke you for freight, okay? So those 10 pallets for just over 10,000 units of glass gets you at 20.5K, all right, just for glass. If you were to maybe be a little conservative or not think so highly of your product, you'd say, you know what, let's pump the brakes on those 10 pallets. I don't even have 20K to pay for this, so I'm gonna buy 5 pallets. So 5 pallets will cost you what less 10 pallets cost you in glass, but the freight is the same because it's still the same truck, it's still the same gas, it's still the same driver, it's still the same labor that has to deliver 10 pallets to the east end of Long Island or 5, okay? So the total due at the bottom for half as many units as glass is not exactly half the price of the first freight, okay? So again, like I said, it's a massive difference when you're building your COGS. This data is super important to understand. Raw goods, glass, label, stoppers, they're not like the funnest to pick through. They all look the same. But when you consider the dramatic difference of maybe being conservative or trying to price something out because you read it, the actual cost, the true cost of these materials arriving on site for your product to then get bottled and then out the door is not the price that you're reading, okay? So it's really important to get an understanding of this data. This is labels, okay? So we're gonna get a very simple, just 2-piece label, no 4-piece, 5-piece, die cut, none of that nonsense, okay? This is just a front and a back label, okay? It's finished on a normal roll, it just pumps out. To buy 100 of these rolls cost, let's say, very close to what it would cost to just buy 200. And then the dramatic difference when you go up is 1,000, okay? If anybody's had anything custom made before, if you ever had custom suits or custom shoes, custom curtains, it's all about the template. It's just the setup. The paper is just nothing at the end of the day. And any print house, small, medium, or large size, will tell you this stuff, okay? It's all about the setup. It's just getting the template for the roll on the machine, the labor to set the template up. And if you look, the cost of 100 labels is $10.45 per label. as opposed to just buying 1,000, even if they get wasted, or you want to give some to your friends, or your wholesaler needs samples, or the ascension of your brand skyrockets before you forecasted, and you're in 13 states instead of 7, you've already managed your COGS effectively for the first round, okay? The biggest advice I could give anybody who really deals with 99% of the people who don't come from a beverage space is understand the data. Understand how much things actually cost, not what you see them in a PDF from any of these vendors, not what you like to work a cost backwards from a retail perspective. Really dive into things and what they actual cost, and then get an understanding of this is what you want to spend on your product and how much is it worth it to commit to this price. Finished cocktail breakdown. This is really basic stuff. Just look at how much all of the ingredients cost, and this should be part of the back end of any works. You've managed your bottles, you manage your labels, you're really happy with your dry goods cost. We did our production run. How much does all that liquid factor in? If I'm trying to have a yield, what is my unit cost in liters? And am I gonna go bankrupt or have to ask my investors for more money? Or can I show some marginal returns in a couple years? But there's no way to understand that stuff unless you do get the really true cost of all of the pieces of the puzzle to bring projects to life, okay? So there's some great opportunity. It's not the most fun, but all of the projects that contract distilleries put together, you can really get an understanding of how much things cost, and that data should be really, really observed, taken seriously, and put into financials. It's just as important as all the consumer marketing. First step starts with production. Thanks all.